Hello everyone, my name is Vangeris, and today I'll be taking you through Skyrim while talking about anything and everything on our way to conquering all the Nordic homeland. As my previous video mentioned, we'll be tackling different parts of Skyrim's questlines in separate videos. Here's a reference for when we're dealing with what. Today we'll be going over both sides of the civil war between the Empire and the Stormcloaks. I'm combining these two sections for obvious reasons, and I expect this to go by rather quickly given the length of the last video and the content therein. Timestamps for each quest and section of the Civil War content can be found in the description, as well as my critical analysis playlist, where you can find the rest of the Skyrim series once they're all uploaded, and my other analytical content. Finally, feel free to leave a comment with your stories, opinions, and criticisms as this goes on, as I'm sure you've got a lot to say about this one way or the other. It helps me iron out the kinks in future videos by letting me know if I get anything wrong, word things poorly, or generally suck at something and need to improve. I welcome the comments and criticisms. Now let's dive into the Skyrim Civil War. We'll be starting off the war from the Imperial perspective, using an orc for the sake of hacking and slashing. Then we'll go through the Helgen sequence and follow Hadvar into the keep. We'll be dual wielding during this run, as it increases damage output, and the orc's racial bonus to double damage dealt while halving damage taken is quite useful. Like you saw during the first video, we'll help him escape and meet his relatives at Riverwood for the main quest. We'll pick up just after meeting Alvor, where we'll loot the Dunstad chest for goodies and work on skills for a bit. After we fashion an Imperial heavy armor set, we'll head up to Solitude to meet with General Tullius. You can do this whenever you want, or after receiving a miscellaneous quest to join the Legion from people around Skyrim. When in Solitude, we'll meet Berend, the smith of the capital, and we'll talk to him a bit about the Empire and the war. He makes armor and weapons for the Imperial soldiers. When asked about his dedication to the Empire, he says he doesn't really support them that much, but he's more loyal to Torrig and now Jarl Elisif. His loyalty lies with Solitude, so where Elisif leads, he follows. This is a common attitude in Skyrim, as the Nords have a strong sense of loyalty, honor, and tradition, which can be found throughout the game. We'll see a lot of that appear even when they are fighting enemy Nords, especially during the Imperial campaign. There's a reason I'm doing this side first. We'll also be seeing Berend a lot, as you'll usually get to know your favorite vendors very well over the course of playing the game. Each hold can become a home, in more ways than one. When we're ready to join the Legion, we'll head into Castle Dower, the main base in Solitude for the General. We'll hear Legate Ricka say Ulfric must be planning an attack on Whiterun, but Tullius says he'd be insane to try, as he doesn't have the men. Ricka's scouts report otherwise, as more join his cause. Riften, Dawnstar, and Winterhold already support him. She says he will attack Whiterun. She'll explain what I mentioned in the previous video, with Jarl Balgruuf refusing to garrison the Legion's troops in the city, while refusing Ulfric's claim as High King as well. Tullius tells her he can stand outside the protection of the Empire, and let Ulfric pillage his city. After more banter about not being able to force a Nord to accept unwanted help, the General will tell Ricka to draft another letter for Balgruuf, but this time add the intelligence regarding Ulfric's plans. He even tells her to embellish if she has to, and that they'll let Balgruuf think asking for help was his idea, which shows the General's cunning and willingness to do what is necessary to win the war. We'll talk to him, reminding him that we met in Helgen, and that we helped Hadvar escape. Tullius hopes that to be true, as he thinks of Hadvar as a good soldier. Then he says that he's failed to report in, so he can't confirm our story. Then we'll get the miscellaneous quest I mentioned earlier. This and the Stormcloak counterpart appear in the miscellaneous category at first, to be a sort of warning that once you join a side, you can't do the other. The other will disappear from the quest log when we formally join one side. Anyway, Tullius mentions that they could use someone resourceful like us, as few survived Helgen. He also says he's sure our imprisonment was a terrible misunderstanding. Then we'll talk to Ricka. She'll reiterate what the General said, then says she has a good feeling about us, and doesn't often get good feelings about anything. Then she says we're not going through the normal process, conveniently sweeping under the rug all the regular and boring stuff you probably have to do to join the Legion. She's got a test lined up, and if we pass it, we'll join the Legion proper. She'll send us to clear out Fort Hraggstad, a local fort that's fallen into disrepair, like many others. Probably overrun with bandits or other vagabonds as well. They want to install a garrison there, then we'll head out to clear the fort. Just outside, we'll get a meme, and then we'll move on.
I used to be an adventurer like you, and I took an arrow in the knee.
Good memes. Now we'll head for the fort, which is west of Solitude and past the Thalmor Embassy. I'm sure this location could be used as a tactical way to protect Solitude's flank, while also keeping an eye on the embassy, as the alliance between the Thalmor and the Empire is strenuous at best. Along the way, we'll run into some cheerful drunks who offer us a drink from Huntingbrew Meadery, a place we'll see later. Nothing comes from this besides some conversation and free mead, but some could say that's worth the time. We'll reach the fort and begin hacking away at the bandits occupying it. As we enter, we'll hear one bandit saying he'll pay off his bounty and walk as a free man. This little bit of text, along with others, help breathe a little life into the average bandit we slaughter for loot and XP. It's a nice detail to have for world building, but it can get repetitive when you hear the same lines from several different bandit types. Anyway, we'll clear the fort and loot it before heading back to Rika. Before we talk to her, we'll catch her and Tullius having a conversation about a fairy tale. Rika mentions that if Ulfric gets his hands on a crown, it won't be a fairy tale, but a problem. The general asks if the Nords put any stock in their own traditions, referencing it's the Moot who chose the High King. Then he says the Empire is backing Elisif, so when the Moot meets, they'll do the sensible thing. Rika says not everyone's agreed to the Moot, saying Nords aren't always sensible, which is an understatement after talking to the Blades, but we'll leave them be. The general, clearly annoyed, asks if Ulfric gets this crown, he'll suddenly become High King. Rika says it's not as simple as that, but the Jagged Crown would be a potent symbol for his cause to rally around. Then the two of them understand what's next. If they get it first and give it to Elisif, the absence of the Moot and having the crown would only help her claim as High Queen. Then the general says he's entrusting her with the resources he can spare, but warns her if this ends up being a waste of time and men. Then he says that she can take the auxiliary, us, and she can send us back when we find nothing but bones and cobwebs. Rika says the Stonefist's no fool, and he's found the crown, but we'll get to it first. Then we'll talk to her, and she'll be glad we returned in one piece, and she'll send men to garrison the fort right away. She also says she's impressed, but before we go any farther, we'll join the Legion proper. We'll talk to Tullius to administer the oath, and we'll be bound to the service of the Emperor and every citizen of the Empire. The oath is as follows. Upon my honor, I do swear undying loyalty to the Emperor, Titus Mede II, and unwavering obedience to the officers of his great empire. May those above judge me, and those below take me, if I fail in my duty. Long live the Emperor, long live the Empire. Then we'll be welcomed into the Legion officially, meaning we can't join the Stormcloaks now, and that once we're in the Legion, we're in for life. Then we're told to head to Baron to get outfitted, but we're good to go, and we'll be told to talk to Rika for our next assignment, and the quest ends. Since we can, we'll talk to Baron to get our gear, with him asking light, medium, or heavy. We're a hefty boy, so we'll get the heavy set. Then he reminds us that we get one free outfit per unit. After that, we have to maintain and repair it ourselves. Then we'll talk to Rika, and she'll relay that Ulfric's right-hand man, Galmar Stonefist, has located what he believes is the final resting place of the Jagged Crown. We're going to make sure he doesn't get his hands on it. The rest of Rika's men are assembling outside Corvinjune, and we'll meet her there. When we ask what the Jagged Crown is, she'll explain that it's a legendary crown, dating back to King Harald's time or before, a powerful relic of a golden age that has long since passed. Legend says the crown is made of bones and teeth of dragons, and that it increases the power of the wearer. Then she'll reiterate that if Ulfric got it, it would be a powerful symbol for his cause. We'll then ask how we know it's in Corvinjune, and Rika says we really don't know. Its location was lost with King Borgus when the Great Hunt killed him while off on his Alessian campaigns. A lot of references during this history lesson. Supposedly, his body was brought back to Skyrim, and secretly buried with the crown. The knowledge of that location was lost in the Wars of Secession, but her agents report that Galmar is convinced that Corvinjune is the tomb. Then Rika says she knows Galmar, as they fought in many wars together. He's not sentimental or taken to fancy. If he believes the crown is there, he's likely found it. It's an interesting detail that is often overlooked that a lot of the soldiers on either side of the Civil War were once battlefield compatriots, either through their own Imperial ties to the Legion before defecting to the Stormcloaks, or were regular Nord neighbors with similar traditions. It makes the Civil War more tragic in that those who were once neighbors and kin are now spilling each other's blood. Anyway, we'll head off and reach a shallow rock overhang under Whiterun on the way to Corvinjune. We'll kill some bandits and steal their horse for the trip. Horses serve as mounts in the game, but they're rather annoying because they're almost always excessively weak and easily killed, so they're usually more hassle than they're worth. Add on that you have to pay for them, or get a bounty if you use someone else's within view of another person. In short, most of the horses are nearly useless in the game, besides when you're encumbered. Anyway, we'll reach Corvinjune and find Hadvar here with other troops. He says it's good to see us, and that he knew we'd make a proper legionnaire. Then he says he's glad we'll be with him, as he doesn't like the looks of this place, and that's not because of the Stormcloaks. We'll say we know what he means, and he'll respond saying he'd rather have a straight fight than creep around a place like this. Then he says we're the Emperor's soldiers, so we'll do our duty no matter what stands in our way. Then we'll hear another soldier say the Stormcloaks were already camped out around the entrance when we got here, but they don't know we're here yet. Rika says we have the element of surprise, and we'll move out in a moment, but she gives a short speech. She details that we all know why we're here, and that the soldiers must realize some of the men we're about to fight may be men we know. They're told to remember they are the enemy now, and will not hesitate to kill us. It's a short thing, but it helps illustrate the point of the Civil War and what it ultimately does. We'll fight through the outside group, and Rika reminds everyone that the Stormcloaks may be traitors, but most of them are probably Legion veterans, so they'll know how to fight. Then we'll head inside and fight our way through the tomb until we reach an area where Rika will say it looks like an ambush. She'll tell us to look around to see if there's another way around to avoid an ambush. We'll find a path on the upper level that leads into an upper area above the path Rika stopped us from going down. She was right about it, as several Stormcloaks were lying in wait to attack. We'll fight on until we run into Draugr. We'll cut them down and reach a Hall of Stories with a claw door. Dead Stormcloaks are ahead, and we'll find the claw we need. Unlike the previous claw door I complained about, there's an appropriate lore reason to have the claw in front of this door, because someone died trying to get in. The previous one I mentioned just had an undead holding it just because. Just thought I should clarify that for consistency's sake. Anyway, we'll move into a room with a gate we'll need to open, so we'll look around and find a secret path after picking up a dagger. It leads to a trapdoor with a tripwire chest. We'll disable the trap to avoid being speared in the buttocks, then we'll loot the room and head back. We'll find a switch on the wall that we'll pull, and then we'll be ambushed by a group of Draugr. Then we'll head into the next area to find a Draugr with the crown on, and he'll get up and we'll kill him. Then we'll loot him to grab the crown, which looks pretty cool, and we'll be told to head back to Solitude, while the rest of our troops stay to investigate the area. We'll check out a word wall nearby for the first word of the slow time shout, and then we'll head out the back door of the ruin to leave the way we came in. We'll return to General Tullius to deliver our report and the crown. Before this, he'll mention that it's good the Empire holds the Reach. If the Stormcloaks had it, the silver mines would give them the coin to hire more thugs and expand their violence. Remember the deal at High Hrothgar? Anyway, we'll explain that the Stormcloaks were ahead of us, and then we'll be told that a message needs to be sent to Jarl Balgruuf of Whiterun. He says they have it on good authority that Ulfric has raised enough men to attack Whiterun, but Balgruuf refuses the Legion's support. We'll be given a missive to give to the Jarl only, and the quest ends. We'll head out to Whiterun, and we'll interact with the Khajiit caravan before we enter the city. These caravans move around, and offer a wide variety of items to buy, so they're a good source of resources if you have the gold to pay. They aren't let into the city, as the Nords look down on the Khajiit as criminals and drug dealers. We'll see more of this as we go along. We'll enter Whiterun, going through much of the main quest requirements to talk to the Jarl, and we'll try to give the Jarl the missive. He'll ask what the old busybody, the general, wants now, and that whatever it is, it'll have to wait until after the dragon situation is dealt with. This basically requires us to go through some of the main questline content to continue with the Civil War questline. We don't need to do much, so it's not a major burden to our progression. Anyway, we'll talk to the Jarl after talking to Farengar, and then we'll mention the message from Tullius. The Jarl recalls the request to garrison men in his castle and ask how many times he must deny the general. We'll explain that Ulfric plans to attack Whiterun, and Balgruuf says he doesn't care what Tullius wants until the dragon threat is dealt with. We'll be told to give it to his steward, but we tell him that it is for his eyes only. He'll say that Avenici is his eyes, and then tells us to give him the letter, as once he has it, he can do as he pleases with it. Then we'll need to assist the Jarl with his dragon problem. We'll progress through the main questline until Dragon Rising is completed to continue the Civil War questline. Once we do so, we'll remind the Jarl of the message, and he says he's studied the documents and finds their content interesting. Then he'll talk to Avenici, asking what he would think if Ulfric did attack Whiterun. Avenici implores caution, urging them to wait and see, which is terrible advice given that they can't really call for help if Ulfric shows up on their doorstep with an army. Anyway, Irileth says that Prey waits, and the Jarl agrees. Avenici asks if that means they'll march on Windhelm, Ulfric's hold capital in Eastmarch, and the Jarl says he's not a fool. He means that it's time to challenge Ulfric to face him as a man, or to declare his intentions. Avenici says Ulfric wouldn't do such a thing, then Irileth reminds us that he was rather straightforward with Torrig. Avenici says he walked up to the boy and murdered him, and then Irileth reminds him that that boy was High King of Skyrim. Then the Jarl says that if Ulfric wants to challenge Balgruuf's rule in the old way, then he'll let him, though he suspects Ulfric will prefer to send his Stormcloaks to do it for him. Irilith points out that Ulfric's already proven his personal strength, and now seeks to prove his armies. Avanici suggests that we consider the general's request if we're going to challenge Ulfric. Irilith agrees, saying Ulfric has made it clear that to refuse his claim is to side with the Empire. Avanici makes a good point by asking what harm is in letting a few legionnaires die in place of Balgruuf's own men. The Jarl thinks it cowardly, and then Irilith asks if it was cowardly to accept the white gold concordat. Balgruuf explains that he was never given a chance to object to the terms of the treaty, and that the Jarls weren't asked, they were told. Avanici says the chest of gold didn't hurt, but the Jarl angrily says this isn't about gold. Then the Jarl will ask us to give a message to Ulfric in the form of an axe. When we ask what it means, if Ulfric returns the axe, we have business to settle. If he keeps it, then we are at peace. When we ask if we should say anything to Ulfric, Balgruuf says men that understand each other need not waste words. There are a few simple truths behind one warrior giving another his axe. We'll ask if Ulfric will let us stroll in without trouble, and Balgruuf says he's a dangerous and bloodthirsty man, but he's also a Nord that honors tradition. We'll need to keep our wits about us to stay alive. Then we're told to return here. If Ulfric isn't bluffing, we'll need every able body to defend Whiterun. Then we'll head out as the Jarl prepares to write a letter before accepting the general's troops. We'll enter Windhelm's Palace of Kings and hear Galmar saying, despite Ulfric's belief that Balgruuf will come around, the Stormcloaks have intercepted couriers from Solitude, and they know that the Empire is putting a great deal of pressure on Whiterun. Ulfric asks what Galmar would have him do, and Galmar says if Balgruuf isn't with them, he's against them. Ulfric says they all know that, and Galmar asks how long he's going to wait. Ulfric suggests taking Whiterun and leaving Balgruuf in disgrace would make a powerful statement. Then Galmar says he wishes Ulfric would take them all out like he did Torrig, and Ulfric says that was merely a message to the other Jarls. Whoever they replace them with will need the support of the Stormcloak armies. Then Ulfric says if they can take Whiterun without bloodshed, that is ideal. Then Galmar says the people are behind Ulfric. Then the Jarl will say that they've been soldiers a long time and know the price of freedom, but the people are still weighing things in their hearts. Galmar angrily asks what they have to weigh, and Ulfric reminds him they have families to think of. Galmar says many of their sons and daughters follow Ulfric's banner, and that they are their families now. Ulfric agrees, and asks Galmar why he fights for him. Galmar will die before elves dictate the fates of men. Ulfric then proudly proclaims that he fights for the men he's held dying in his arms on foreign soil. He fights for their wives and children, whose names he heard whispered in their last breaths. He fights for the few who did come home, only to find their country full of strangers wearing familiar faces. He fights for his people that were impoverished to pay the debts of an empire too weak to rule them, yet brands them criminals for wanting to rule themselves. He fights so that all the fighting he's already done hasn't been for nothing. Galmar says Ulfric gives voice to what we all feel, and that is why he will be High King. But the day words are enough will be the day soldiers like them will no longer be needed. Then Ulfric says he would gladly retire from the world if such a day came. After all that, we'll give Ulfric the axe. He says we're brave to carry such a message. Then he says to return the axe, and warns that the Jarl should prepare to entertain visitors. Then we'll ask him why he made war with his own people by killing the High King. He'll say that he's shown the people that when the Jarls drink the Empire's milk, it makes them weak. Now he will show them the path back to their strength. There is no progress without sacrifice, and the Empire and the Jarls who back them must be swept away as the people, and Ulfric himself, demand it. We'll tell him he'll be stopped, and he says it probably will be true that he'll meet the end in a dark alley with a dagger in his back. But the people have seen the truth, and they will not back down. Then we'll head back to Whiterun. We'll enter Dragon's Reach and find the Jarl talking with Imperial soldiers, as another soldier comes up to them. He's out of breath, and the Jarl explains the outer wall should be defended, but the Stormcloaks have catapults prepared with fire, putting the already falling apart walls under even more stress. Then the Jarl says his men are fearless, but he's worried about the Imperial milk drinkers. The Imperial legate here says he can take his men and leave. Then the Jarl backtracks fast and says just not to let him down. We'll be interrupted by idle NPC chatter, but it can vaguely be heard that the Stormcloaks are hiding in the countryside, so it isn't long until they attack. Then the other soldier says the Stormcloaks are on the move, and we'll see what the Stormcloaks are made of. Then we'll head into the next quest. The battle for Whiterun begins with Avanici pushing the Jarl to hold soldiers back to secure Dragon's Reach. But the Jarl tells him to go away, as we have war lurking outside his walls, and he's telling the Jarl this now. Then we'll meet other Imperial soldiers at the main gate, as we see flaming balls falling into the city from the catapults. We'll regroup outside with Rika, and she'll give a speech saying that this is the day we send a message to Ulfric and the rebel Jarls who support him. By cutting out the disease of this rebellion, we will make this country whole again. Then we'll defend the Whiterun wall from the Stormcloak advance. We'll kill enemy troops until their forces retreat from the wall. This is where the game's combat really comes into play in a grand sense, which shows the simplicity in it. I haven't talked about it yet, but the regular melee combat of the game is rather simple in comparison to everything else. Granted, it's melee combat, so it's not going to be too complicated beyond stab or whack a person to win. That being said, the melee combat can be a bit clunky, as it often devolves into spamming your basic attack or power attack until the enemies die, and then repeating this until the enemy is dead or you need to heal. A lot of the other combat options are much deeper than this in terms of what you need to know and can do to kill your foe. It's something that I've complained about throughout the years, as Skyrim's combat is a very mixed bag, with your average melee combat being the weakest of them all. We'll see the other styles of fighting as we get through this series, but I wanted to point out here that I find the basic melee combat to be particularly weak. To be fair, that's not really the focus of the game, so it's not that big of an issue. If this were a combat-focused game like Dark Souls 2, and the combat had problems, that would really screw things up, wouldn't it? Anyway, we'll defend Whiterun and then regroup with the Jarl and other soldiers before the quest ends. A lot of quests in this game end in really odd places, and I really wish I knew why. Anyway, the next quest begins as we meet up with the Jarl. He gives a speech, saying we should revel in our victory and that the halls of Sovngarde are no doubt ringing with our praises. In defeating the Stormcloak traitors, we have proven the hollowness of their cause, and the fullness of our hearts. The citizens of Whiterun are forever in our debt, but Ulfric will not stop here. He will continue to strike out against any true Nord who remains faithful to the Empire. Ulfric will continue to sow discord and chaos wherever he can. So, we must continue to fight this insurrection, lest our brothers die for nothing. He says to carry on, as his gratitude and blessings go with us. We'll see Hadvar briefly, who says he was sure he'd find us face down in the dirt. Thanks for your faith in us, buddy. We'll talk to the Jarl and he'll thank us for our help and says that it'd be his honor if we decide to make Whiterun our home. We'll go over living in holds in another video. We'll ask what the Jarl thinks it will take to end the war, and he bluntly says Ulfric's head on a pike. Balgruuf promises that Ulfric doesn't really care about Skyrim's independence or welfare of its people. He's nothing more than a barbarian renegade whose lust for power has cost the lives of countless innocents. Then we'll ask why he sided with the Empire, and he says mutual advantage. For centuries, they've benefited from the Empire's protection and prosperous trade with the South. In exchange, the people of Cyrodiil sleep peacefully, knowing their northern border is guarded by the fiercest warriors in all of Tamriel. We'll also ask why the Jarl thinks Ulfric killed Torrig, with Balgruuf saying he thought it was the only way to make his point, and because he knew he could. Then we'll report to General Tullius. He'll say that with Ulfric's defeat at Whiterun, and gaining the loyalty of Jarl Balgruuf, perhaps the Stormcloaks will soon lose heart for this rebellion. Then we get a promotion to Quester, with the General giving us a blade as a symbol of our new station and responsibility. He'll keep an eye on our progress, as the Empire rewards excellence. We'll ask for our next orders, and Tullius says we'd be wasted as a regular soldier, so he has special plans for us. We'll be told to find the hidden Imperial camp in the Pale. Rika will be there, and will give important tasks to us, and will be needed when we reclaim the capital. When we ask what exactly we'll be doing, the General says whatever Rika tells us to do, especially finding creative ways to disrupt the Stormcloaks along the way. We'll interact with the map on his table before we leave, as it opens up key locations for the Civil War across the map. We can't fast travel to any of them after interacting with the map, but it helps to learn where everything is. One thing worth mentioning is that the Reunification of Skyrim quest is an overarching quest that has several sub-quests within it, so once we meet up with Rika, we'll be separating the rest of the video by sub-quest. This works the same for the Liberation of Skyrim quest on the Stormcloak side of the war. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Then we'll head into the next quest. We'll reach the Imperial camp in the Pale and talk to Rika. She'll direct us to deliver false orders to the Stormcloak commander in Dawnstar, but first we need to intercept a courier to get a hold of rebel orders for the forgeries. The Nightgate and Candlehearth Inns are frequent stops for Stormcloak runners, so they'd be good places to convince the locals to help. Then we'll head into the quest proper. We'll head to Windhelm to check out the Candlehearth Inn. We'll ask the innkeeper Elda for information before she refuses. A little gold opens her lips, and she'll say that the courier left recently, so we can pursue him or wait for him to return. I usually prefer pursuing the target, as they'll be out in the wilderness where we can kill them for the orders without gaining a bounty or having to guess what time they arrive and check each room over and over. Plus, it's more of an adventure to hunt someone down, rather than sit at a bar for 38 hours waiting on them. Anyway, we'll run along the road from Windhelm to Dawnstar until we find the courier. We'll stumble across a free horse for some reason, and we'll use it to our advantage. We'll catch up to the courier and murder them in the snow before we take their documents. We'll return to Rika, and she'll be interested to see that the Stormcloaks know more of our plans than she expected. She'll see that Fort Dunstad is in need of reinforcements, so we'll make sure they won't be getting any. She'll correct the documents and tell us to give them to the Stormcloak commander in Dawnstar to throw their forces off. We'll meet the commander in Dawnstar and give him the report. He'll say he doesn't recognize us, and ask why we aren't wearing the Stormcloak colors. Then we'll say it's easier to sneak past the enemy in this. Then the quest will end as the Stormcloak commander thinks reinforcements are on the way for the fort, and enemy troop movements are revealed. I'm literally in enemy armor, and he believed my story. What a sucker. We'll return to the Pale Camp, and Rika will direct us to attack Fort Dunstad. We'll head over there and meet up with our fellow legionnaires, and then we'll attack the fort. We'll break through barricades they've set up, and begin slaying the Blues. This works similarly to the Whiterun attack, where we'll defeat a percentage of the enemies before the remaining soldiers retreat or are killed. Luckily, we won't have to dig too far into each keep for the Stormcloaks, as they'll all come out to fight. This is a great opportunity to loot Stormcloak or Imperial armor if you want to keep it, as well as a great opportunity to get offensive and defensive skills up. Not to mention the loot from all the dead soldiers. Once we've taken the fort, the quest ends. These fort quests aren't really quests as much as specific encounters, but we'll move on to report to General Tullius, as we've regained the Pale by taking over this one fort. Somehow. The General will say that taking the Pale gives us another port in Dawnstar, and puts us within striking distance of Windhelm, which is sure to make Ulfric a bit more cautious. Then he says battles are won by trained and disciplined men. Wars are won by talented and exceptional individuals. We're promoted to Prefect and are given another blade. Then we'll head into the next quest to help take the Rift. We'll make our way to the Imperial camp in the Rift and meet up with Rika. She'll point us to Riften and its steward, Anuriel, as she has arrangements with the Thieves Guild that would be rather embarrassing if made public. We need to find evidence of her corrupt activities and use it to make her cooperate with us. We're basically blackmailing her. This requires stealth and discretion, as we'll need to sneak into Anuriel's quarters to find evidence. This won't go so well, since we're a dual-wielding, bloodthirsty warrior, but we'll find a way. That way is taking off all our armor, quickly sneaking behind to get to Anuriel's chambers, looting the evidence without anyone noticing, then getting out before we're arrested. Not the most graceful thing to see a naked orc rummaging through someone's things, but it gets the job done. Anyway, we'll show Anuriel the letter, and she'll discreetly tell us to follow her to deal with this. She's fully aware that we're extorting her, so we'll say the rebels are doing a fine job destroying themselves, and she'll pick up that we're an Imperial spy. She has no strong love for the Stormcloaks or the Empire, with the Civil War making it difficult for a resourceful woman to advance her interests. Then she says we may find a way for us both to prosper from this interaction. She'll tell us about a large shipment of gold and weapons, enough to make a significant difference in the war. She'll make sure we come to an agreement before giving details. Then she'll say it's a wagon heading to Windhelm from Riften. It'll be a slow-moving caravan carrying a heavy shipment and is guarded by many men. Then we'll pretend we never had this discussion and return to Rika. She'll tell us to meet up with scouts to overpower the caravan. We'll do so and find Hadvar leading the group. He'll ask how we've been, and we'll learn that he was promoted after Whiterun. He needs this to go well, as this is his first command since then. Then we learn he has PTSD, as he mentions seeing the battle when he closes his eyes at night. The men he's killed haunt him, and he asks if it's the same for us. We'll say only a beast kills without feeling, and he heard it gets easier, but he's not sure if that's a good thing. Then we'll explain we're here for the caravan, and we'll say we blackmailed Anuriel for the information. The wagon had an accident and is stranded, and Hadvar has a plan. We'll take out their sentry and situate ourselves over the camp. Then we'll infiltrate their position and get their attention while the other troops hit them with a barrage of arrows. Hopefully, it'll even the odds. You can choose to do this, or you can take care of it yourself. Either way, we'll clear the area of storm scum, and Hadvar will remain to guard the shipment, and will return to camp to ask for a new wagon and report our success. Rika says she can use the weapons here, and pass the coin on to Solitude. Then we'll join a group of soldiers to take Fort Greenwall. We'll group up with the soldiers attacking Fort Greenwall, and we'll remove all blue from the premises. When complete, we'll return to Tullius to report that we took one structure, and now we own the Rift. He'll say taking control of the area was a great victory, as Ulfric must be nervous with us so close to his doorstep. Then he'll say that by holding on to Falkreath, we control access to the Reach, Whiterun, and the Rift. Ulfric will try for it soon, but we'll be there to stop him. Then we'll get into the next quest. We'll be heading to Winterhold this time, and we'll meet Rika at the camp. So tell us that our objective is Fort Kastav. It holds Imperial prisoners, but we'll turn that into an advantage. She sent men to scout the area, and our orders are to meet them, find a way to slip in, free the prisoners, and take over the fort from the inside. We'll head to Fort Kastav and meet Hadvar again. He'll complain about the cold and mentions that we're outnumbered again, more so than when we took the wagon. He'll tell us the plan is to use a grate outside the wall that used to be buried in snow. It looks like the Blues don't know it's there, so we'll use it to sneak into the prison. Once we've rescued the prisoners and made it to the courtyard, Hadvar and the rest of the troops will come in to help finish clearing the fort. We'll sneak up to the grate and use it to enter the prison. We'll free the prisoners after getting a key, and we'll fight our way out to the courtyard. Once outside, Hadvar and his team will join us, and we'll take over Kastav. Hadvar will stay and clean up the mess while we return to Tullius. We've taken Winterhold with this victory, which actually makes some sense since Winterhold is tiny and only has one real civilized location, and even that's tiny as well. When we reach the general, he says now that we have Winterhold, he can garrison troops there until we're ready to march on Windhelm. Then he says that he's come to rely heavily on us, so he finds it fitting that we join the upper echelon. We're promoted to legate, the same rank as Rika, and we're given another gift. Then he says we have little time to celebrate, as we're gathering for our final assault on Windhelm. Then he'll point us to our camp in Eastmarch. We'll meet Rika at the camp, and we'll attack Fort Amol. No screwing around with anything else this time, as we're taking over. We'll head out to reach the fort before I make a bad drop and break my orc's legs, killing him. Rest in peace, Orky Borky. We'll reach Fort Amol and join our men in liberating it of cloak fever. We'll return to Rika after our victory, and she says we're taking Windhelm, and we'll begin the final battle and quest of this side of the war. We'll head to Windhelm to find it under siege, and Imperial troops amassing at the main gate. General Tullius is here himself, and gives a speech that it's time to deliver the final blow to the rebellion. We've all fought bravely, and have brought us to this point. Ulfric thinks he can hide behind the walls of his castle, but we will fight our way in and drag him out through the rubble to face justice. Because this is the end for them, the Stormcloaks will fight like cornered rats. They will be fierce and crafty, but they are no match for legionnaires. We are the best and brightest warriors in Tamriel, professional soldiers, fearless and devastating. Then he says the Emperor will be paying close attention to what happens here today, and those who distinguish themselves will be well rewarded. Then we begin the final battle. We'll fight through the streets of Windhelm, slowly making our way through multiple barricades to reach Ulfric's castle. When we enter, Tullius will order the room secured and lays out the charges against Ulfric. He is guilty of insurrection, murder of Imperial citizens, the assassination of King Torrig, and high treason against the Empire. Then he says it's over before Galmar disagrees. Rika tells Galmar to step aside, as we're here for Ulfric's surrender. Ulfric says he'll never surrender Skyrim into the hands of a corrupt and dying empire, and Rika makes a good point, saying Skyrim doesn't belong to him, with Ulfric saying this is true, but he belongs to Skyrim. Tullius has heard enough and offers them two options: public execution, or execution by Tullius' hand. It doesn't matter which choice to Tullius, as he'll be sending their heads back to Cyrodiil in any case. Then we'll defeat them both remarkably fast, and Ulfric goes to a knee instead of dying. Then Tullius says he can't escape this time, before he sends Ulfric to Sovngarde. Ulfric requests the Dragonborn kill him for a better song, but will refuse, saying we've had our fair share of killing today. Tullius will finish off Ulfric, and Rika will say Talos be with him under her breath. It's a nice detail showing how deep the Talos worship goes, and helps to avoid making each side look one-dimensional in this debacle. Afterwards, Tullius says the men expect a speech, and that we'll hand the city over to Brunwulf Freewinter. Then the general says it's been an honor to have us at his side, and gives us his sword as a token of appreciation. We don't get any special Tullius weapon, but some enchanted weapon appropriate for our level. Then we'll head outside for the speech. Tullius reiterates much of what he said earlier: head on a pike, Freewinter's in charge, and so on. Then he lets the soldiers know many of them will be staying to aid in restoring order and stamping out any embers of rebellion left. In appreciation for their service, Tullius is doubling their pay and compensation to the widows of the fallen. I don't know how he can be able to do that so freely, but whatever. Then he says he hates giving speeches, and that he hopes they didn't just create a martyr. Rika says there's bound to be resistance, as many Stormcloak camps are still tucked away in the hills. They'll strike when they can, but without Ulfric to inflame their passions, they'll settle down and return to their homes and families. But in the meantime, we'll continue to put them to the sword. Then Tullius thanks us for our help, and we've finished the Civil War questline for the Imperials. Rika will randomly throw out that Ulfric would expunge anyone from Skyrim whose only crime was to be born of a non-Nord woman, which is unacceptable to free men everywhere. I'm mentioning this here as she randomly said it, and it's worth mentioning before we join the Stormcloaks. We'll talk to Rika, wondering if there will be peace. He says there are still Stormcloaks that will continue to fight and bring misery to the people, but they are few in number. The ordinary citizen will be happy to get back to life as normal and to have their families return home. She says they should enjoy it while they can, as she suspects Tamriel will be called to arms in a not-too-distant future. It's a common theme with Rika that she only wants peace for her people, and also wants to avoid making them suffer any more than they already have. When we ask if there is anything further we can do for the Legion, she'll say the Legion's work is finished, but we are free to roam. She suspects that we'll be of greater good to Skyrim out there in the world. Then she'll reiterate the point of Stormcloak troops hiding in the hills, and saying it is our duty to deal with them. Then we'll ask what her next move is, and she'll say Tullius left her to assist in the new governments. She may understand Skyrim more than the general, but she's a soldier, not a politician. Still, she'll try her best, as this is the land that shaped her, and she's proud to have a part in making it strong again. Before we head into the Stormcloak side of things, I wanted to mention that I appreciate the Imperial questline for having a foreign outsider perspective with Tullius, but also a native daughter of Skyrim perspective in Rika. I believe it helps bring some perspective to the bigger picture of this conflict, and the cultural differences between Cyrodiil and Skyrim. Not to mention that Rika serves as an in-between regarding what the Empire wants and what Skyrim traditionally values. I think she's a very underrated character, both in function and characterization. But with that, reunification is complete. Hail the Legion, hail the Emperor. We'll be playing Stormbro of Windhelm as we jump into the Stormcloak side of the Civil War. Along the way, we'll see Ralof's introduction to the game. We'll follow Ralof into the keep, and he says he'll meet another dead Stormcloak in Sovngarde before he removes our bindings. We'll take some of the gear from the dead guy, and we'll need a key to open a locked door. We'll have the gate we came through on our first round open with Imperials we encountered outside coming through. We'll kill them and loot a key off the captain to make it through the locked door. We'll continue down like before, but now we'll face Imperial soldiers where the Stormcloaks were previously. We'll help kill the Torturer and his assistant before looting a two-handed axe and equipping our Stormcloak gear. We'll go through all the tutorials we went through earlier and eventually escape Helgen. While we do so, I'll explain a few things about the melee weapons. Melee weapons follow a few general rules. First are the speed rules. Swords swing faster than axes, and axes are faster than maces. This also works with the two-handed versions as well, but they are slower in general since they're bigger. Then there's the damage rule, usually being that the faster the weapon, the weaker its damage is. This holds true to many balancing choices in gaming where heavier, hard-hitting weapons are slower to counterbalance the damage to swing speed. This speed generally works with most one-handed and two-handed weapons, but there are exceptions found in more unique items. We'll be two-handing during this run, so we'll have a grand old time smacking away with both hands. Once we're outside of Helgen, Ralof will mention that he has family in Riverwood. His sister, Gerdur, runs the mill in town, and we'll meet her when we reach the mill. She mentions that if we're looking for work, we can see Hod at the mill, as he needs firewood. Firewood is the cheapest and simplest labor in the game, as you simply chop an infinitely farmable firewood pile and give it to Hod or other workers who will pay 5 gold per piece of wood. It's useful, but time-consuming, as the animation is slow, and you can't make it work continuously without mods. Anyway, we'll mention Ralof, and she asks how we know him. We'll say we escaped from the Imperials, and she mentions she heard of Ulfric's capture. Then she says she can't take the word of a stranger in times like these. We'll mention the dragon attack, and she thought she was seeing things. Then she says she believes us, as we look like someone who's seen a dragon. No idea how you tell that nowadays, but okay. Anyway, she'll point us toward the Jarl like Alvor did, and then we'll wait for Ralof to appear. When he does, Gerda worries if it's safe for him to be here if the Imperials are looking for him. We'll go to an open area near the mill, a totally not obvious place to see a Stormcloak soldier talking with civilians, where we'll have a talk with Gerdur, Hod, and Ralof. As you can see, they'll bug out a bit before we get the conversation going. We'll ask Ralof about Ulfric, and he explains that they were on their way to Darkwater Crossing in the south of Eastmarch. The Imperials ambushed them, outnumbering them 5 to 1. Ulfric ordered the Stormcloaks stop, with Ralof saying he probably didn't want them dying for nothing. It's one of those moments where you can read into it a little and interpret it one way or the other. Did he order a surrender because he's a coward, or because he wanted to live to fight another day? It's interpretable however you want to look at it. Anyway, Ralof will continue, saying they stopped in Helgen, and we know the rest. When we ask if the dragon is on their side, Ralof says he doesn't think even Ulfric could pull a dragon out of his pocket. Ralof is grateful for the dragon, as it prevented a close shave from an Imperial executioner. Then we'll be interrupted by Frodnar, Ralof's nephew and Gerdur and Hod's son, as he asks a bunch of questions before Gerdur says it's not the time for this, and to watch the South Road and let them know if Imperial soldiers are coming. Ralof makes a comment that Frodnar will be joining the fight soon enough, before Frodnar shares his enthusiasm for joining, and he runs off to watch the South Road. Then Ralof will relay what we just heard to Hod and Gerdur, and recounts the dragon attack and our escape. He takes a moment to comment about the Empire not giving Ulfric a fair trial, as all of Skyrim would have seen the truth then. It makes me wonder how trials work in this world, if they differ much from country to faction, and so on. It should be pointed out that if Tullius wanted to quiet Ulfric's tongue and cause, he could have just killed him during the ambush. Would have made things easier for him. I think it's fair to say that they were going to execute him in public as a warning for other rebellious souls, but letting him speak would have been out of the question no matter what, given his ability to use shouts. Anyway, we'll learn that nobody has come up the South Road besides Ralof and ourselves, as far as Gerdur knows, so we'll lay up for a while. Ralof would hate to put Gerdur's family in danger, but Gerdur says to let her worry about that. Then she'll offer supplies like Alvor did. Her loot isn't as good as Alvor's because Alvor is a smith with supplies we can take for smithing purposes, while Gerdur just runs a mill that doesn't tactically help the player in any way, so that's one reason to side with Hadvar in the beginning. But that doesn't limit which side you can join in the war. Then Gerdur asks if anyone else escaped Helgen. Ralof says it'll take more than that to kill Ulfric, and Ralof mentions that we should go to Windhelm to join the fight to free Skyrim. We've seen the true face of the Empire today, at least according to Ralof. With that, we'll head to Lucan for the Golden Claw quest, since we'll have to do it anyway to progress the Civil War. At the bandit tower we saw way back when, we'll meet a frightened woman who says she's been wandering for a long time. She was kidnapped by bandits near Mistwatch. She managed to pick the lock and escape, but she got lost. We'll point her toward town, and she'll thank us for our help, and urges us to stop the bandits at Mistwatch. Then we'll look at the map to see where she came from. Mistwatch is an east march, so she managed to miss 3 major settlements on her way here. I'd say that's impressive if I was into awarding lost idiots. Anyway, we'll progress the Golden Claw quest, picking up an ancient Nordic greatsword of cold along the way, and we'll return to Lucan. We'll get some random dialogue where Camilla calls us a strapping young man, and then mentions that she came from the Imperial province to work with her brother. She'll also mention that the war with the Thalmor ruined everything. Again, that little bit of world building matters. Now we'll join the Stormcloaks properly. We'll run to Windhelm and meet with Ulfric. We'll see the same conversation we saw earlier in the Imperial campaign before we talk to him. When we talk to the Jarl, he'll mention that we met at Helgen and that we could have gone anywhere, but we came to fight the Empire. He says we've come to the right place, and then to speak with Galmar. He's always looking for able fighters, and not everyone can say they made it out of Helgen. Then he mentions that our criminal past stays in the past, and we're welcome into the ranks as long as we fight for him with honor and integrity. We'll talk to Galmar, who'll say Ulfric mentioned Helgen to him, and that we're likely worth something to him if we could survive that. Then he asks why a foreigner would want to fight for Skyrim, even though we're a Nord. I don't know why we're treated as a foreigner here, but we'll say Skyrim is our home. He asks if we're willing to die for our home. He says he has a test for us as well, and we're sent to Serpentstone Island. If we survive, we'll pass the test. When we ask what's at Serpentstone Island, he'll say it's a strange rock formation built by the ancients, and something there attracts ice wraiths. We kill an ice wraith, and he'll let us join. Then he'll give us an elixir of resist cold, and we'll head out. I'm not sure why this entry quest is so different from the Imperial starting quest. Clear a fort versus kill an ice wraith. Granted, ice wraiths are typically stronger than bandits, but it's such a radically different entry requirement that it begs a discussion as to why. It's probably due to some traditional and honor-bound historical significance of the Stormcloaks, while the Empire is all tactics. Anyway, we'll leave Windhelm and head north to reach Serpentstone Island, going way out into the ice fields on Skyrim's northern border. We'll make it up to the rock formation and fight an ice wraith. We'll kill it pretty easily, and then we'll check out the Serpent Stone. This is another bonus stone offering a ranged paralyzing attack, usable once a day. Compared to other stones, this one is pretty terrible. It can definitely be useful, but it's outclassed by most of the other stones in terms of usefulness and how often it'll be useful. Anyway, we'll head back to Windhelm and let Galmar know how awesome we are. Before we talk to them, we'll hear them setting up finding the Jagged Crown like in the Imperial campaign. Ulfric asks why they're wasting time and dwindling resources chasing a legend that they don't even know exists. Galmar says the Jarls are upset and don't all support Ulfric. Ulfric doesn't care for the Jarls or the mood, as is evidenced in his dialogue, which doesn't help the growing reputation as a power-mad man getting other people killed to reach his goals. He says they shouldn't risk letting them put Torig's woman on the throne. as she would hand Skyrim over to the elves on a silver plate. Allegedly. Galmar says all the more reason to find the crown, as it would legitimize Ulfric's claim to the throne. Basically, cheating the system to become king doesn't seem like something a great leader would do given the Nordic revere of tradition and honor. Again, Ulfric's not looking like a great leader during this, as he wants to avoid tradition and avoid dealing with the other Jarls. He doesn't even want to use the workaround of the crown either. Seems like the Thalmor torture broke his Nordic spirit down and replaced it with something else. Anyway, Galmar says the crown will be a symbol of righteousness of our cause. Then he says the crown heralds back to a time before Jarls and Moots, when a king was a king because his enemies fell before him, and his people rose because they loved him. Then Ulfric relents, letting us go through a moldering dungeon to see if we can find Galmar's Jagged Crown. When we finally talk to Galmar, he'll say he owes Ulfric a drink, implying Ulfric thought we would return, while Galmar did not. We'll mention that it sounded like we were sent out to die, and Galmar says it was as much a test of abilities as well as resolve. If we made it back, he'd know that our heart was in it. Then we'll ask about the Stormcloak oath, with Galmar explaining that we swear fealty to Ulfric, our fellow Stormcloaks, and to Skyrim and her people. We'll ready ourselves for the oath, with Galmar saying that once we swear this oath, we're one of them, a hero of the people, and a true son of Skyrim. The oath is as follows. I do swear my blood and honor to the service of Ulfric Stormcloak, Jarl of Windhelm, and true High King of Skyrim. As Talos as my witness, may this oath bind me to death and beyond, even to my lord, as to my fellow brothers and sisters in arms. All hail the Stormcloaks, the true sons and daughters of Skyrim. Now we're one of them, and we'll tag along with Galmar on a trip, and he'll give us a full Stormcloak set, and the quest ends. Now we'll head into the Jagged Crown quest. Before we get into the gritty of it, we'll ask Galmar some questions. First, we'll ask for his reasons for joining the war. He aggressively asks when does a man need a reason to protect his family or to defend his homeland. Then he says the Outlanders and Empire are the ones that need reasons. We'll ask if he opposes anyone who's not a Nord, and his answer is that he opposes tyranny, and those who tell him how to live, what to think, and what to believe. He's a man, and Skyrim is man's homeland. That's a fact he's proud of, and there's no shame in that, and then angrily tells us to read our history before walking away from the conversation. This seems like a giant diversion from answering honestly, since a simple yes or no would suffice. As we'll see throughout the rest of the game, the Stormcloaks aren't the most tolerable bunch. You can see as much when you look at where the Nords live in Windhelm and where the non-Nords live in Windhelm. Anyway, we'll talk to him again to progress, and he'll explain he's found the final resting place of the crown. I'll be skipping over what we already learned during the Imperial run. Then Galmar gives a verse that talks of the crown. Maw unleashing razor snow, of dragons from the blue brought down, births the walking winter's woe, the High King in his jagged crown. This text can also be seen in loading screens with the crown floating next to the text. Fun fact for you. Anyway, Galmar says the crown was a symbol of the High King's might and power. He also mentions that it is said to contain a portion of the power of every king who has worn it. Who would dare deny Ulfric's claim with the crown upon his head? With that, we'll head out. We'll meet the Stormcloaks at Corvinjund, but as we run to the location, we'll run into a fugitive who tells us to hold on to an iron axe, and he'll pay us later. He'll threaten to kill us if we double-cross or snitch. He'll be followed by a hunter looking for someone. We'll give him the axe as we're sure he was the one who had his axe stolen. Then we'll help kill the thief, and we'll be on our way. Once we arrive at Corvinjund, we'll see the reverse of what happened during the Imperial campaign. We'll find Ralof here, who says he's glad we're beside him, and that the place gives him chills, and he doesn't care who knows it. When we ask what he's talking about, he'll mention his father always told him to stay away from these old ruins. But we've got a job to do, and nothing's going to stand in our way. Then we'll see Galmar getting a report from a Stormcloak soldier, who says Imperial troops are camped out around the entrance. Galmar says if the Imperials are comfortable, let's slip in and send them to their graves that way. He's a little psycho, and it's showing. He asks what the Legion is doing here, and curses Imperial spies, before he says we should have some fun, as they don't seem to know we're here yet. Then he'll give a speech similar to what Rika said to the Imperials before we charge in. We'll get to slicing and work our way inside and fight through the area like before. Unlike the previous run, we'll ignore the ambush and rush in to wipe out the Imperials and move on. We'll grab the crown and head back to Windhelm after looting everything and learning the shout. We'll talk to Ulfric, and he'll mention that Tullius has camps in the Pale, and that the Empire's underestimation of the Stormcloak forces will be their undoing. Then we'll give him the crown and mention that now he owes Galmar a drink. We'll mention that we lost a lot of good men, and hope this trek was worth it. Ulfric says the blood of fallen heroes will make Skyrim free, and to never doubt it, Galmar or him. Then he'll give us his war axe, and the next quest begins. Then we'll start on a message to Whiterun. This time, the roles are reversed again, with Ulfric offering his axe to Balgruuf for intentions or unresolved issues. Then he'll mention that he has a temper, which we've seen a little of already, but it's not nearly as worrying as Galmar's bloodlust. Anyway, we'll head to Balgruuf and we'll give him the axe. We'll see the same dialogue as before, with slight modifications implying Ulfric's nature of stabbing in the back. Then we're told to get the axe back to Ulfric, and we'll leave. When we return, Ulfric mentions taking Hjalmarch would be within spitting distance of the capital, and then we'll ask him some questions. He'll tell us that he learned about shouts as he trained with the Greybeards at High Hrothgar when he was a boy, and explain some of the concepts we went over during the main quest line regarding shouts. Then he'll elaborate on killing Torrig. He explains that the rumor of him shouting the king to death is neither entirely true or false. Any Nord can learn the way of the voice by studying with the Greybeards, given enough ambition and dedication. When he shouted Torrig to the ground, he proved he had neither, but it was Ulfric's sword that killed him. We'll ask how the war goes, and Ulfric admits he's unsure why Tullius is trying to take Winterhold from them, but if he wants to throw his men away, we will gladly accept the gift. We'll also ask why he's fighting this war, and he says it's because they're done bleeding for an empire that won't bleed for them. Untold numbers of Nords died defending the empire against the Dominion, and for what? Skyrim was sold to the Thalmor so the emperor could keep his throne. They're fighting because their own Jarls, once strong and wise men, have become fearful and blind to their people's suffering, which is only half true. More Nords would be available to fight the Thalmor if this civil war wasn't going on, but Ulfric and Tullius can't agree on how best to deal with the external threat, and Ulfric wants to start a commotion. It's like your little brother pitching a fit to fight you when you both know your drunk dad is inches away from popping a bottle open if you agitate him. When asked why he killed Torrig, Ulfric says it was to prove Skyrim's wretched condition. How is the king supposed to be the defender of Skyrim if he can't defend himself? I'd throw back that he's killing someone much weaker than him using a power few have, which doesn't prove his point. It's like a level 100 going up against a level 20, and saying he proves how weak everyone else is by killing the level 20. That's not the best way to make a political point. Most of what Ulfric says is pure bravado pushed in the wrong directions most of the time, which makes me wonder what the Thalmor did to him and how it influenced him. Anyway, we'll mention Torrig's widow having a claim to the throne, and Ulfric says she is now Jarl because of Imperial interests, but the moot has not yet met to name her High Queen. Then he says they won't if he has any say in it. Again, this is the revolutionary stuff that leads to dictatorship. Electing people? That's for chumps. Let's just kill people. It's not like the Thalmor, the actual enemy, is doing the same. Then we'll ask if Ulfric desires to be the High King, and he says there hasn't been a true High King for generations. For too long he's been hand-picked by the Emperor, and given emphatic nods by Jarls addicted to Imperial coin. It's time Skyrim had a real king, one of its own making. I have no idea how truthful any of this is, and we have no reference point other than Torrig, who sounded like barely more than a boy when Ulfric killed him. Again, the picture being painted doesn't portray Ulfric in the best light. I don't know if that's the point, but it's not good to write multiple choice stories where certain sides and major choices are much more dubious and reckless than others. Long conversations aside, we'll give Ulfric's axe back to him, and he'll say he was wrong about Balgruuf. Then Galmar says their armies are ready, and Ulfric asks if any man is ever ready to give the order that will mean the deaths of many. It's not like it stopped him before, and Galmar points this out, but in a more positive light. Then Galmar hypes Ulfric up as the man that can give the order to take Whiterun, if he'll only give it. Ulfric finally gives the order and tells us to go to the front lines to take Whiterun. Then the quest ends. We'll begin the next quest by mentioning that Ulfric is called a murderer. Then he retorts that he challenged Torrig and he accepted. No murder was committed, but he admits that Torrig didn't stand a chance against him, and that was the point. He was just a puppet of the Empire and not a High King of Skyrim. Then Ulfric says Torrig's father perhaps was a true High King, but not his son. He was too privileged and too foolish, more interested in entertaining his queen than ruling his country. Then we'll head out. We'll meet Galmar at the camp outside of Whiterun as we witness the city under siege, this time from the attacker's perspective. Galmar gives a speech, saying the enemy thinks our cause false, and us nothing more than thieves, thugs, and murderers. But no, the Stormcloaks are farmers, craftsmen, sons and daughters of shopkeepers, maidservants, and soldiers. They are the sons and daughters of Skyrim. Galmar says we have come this far because our cause is true. We fight as one, and our hearts are bursting with anger. His definitely is. But then he goes on saying what we do here, we do for all true Nords of Skyrim. He says Whiterun's walls are tall but old, and crumbling, like the Empire, whose legion lines them. He'll say our objective is the drawbridge, and once it's down, we'll be able to take the city. Then we'll charge in and slash through some Imperials and their barricades. Unlike the previous battle we saw at Whiterun, we'll be fighting our way up to Dragon's Reach, beginning with us finding a way to lower the drawbridge. We'll work our way up and around the wall to lower it, and then we'll head inside the city. We'll fight up to the Jarl, and he'll say he won't let us take the city without raising his sword. We'll beat the Jarl down, and he'll surrender. Then he calls out Vignar Greymane, saying his family was noticeably absent from the walls, and now he knows why. He asks if a dagger in the back would have sufficed, as the man walks up to us. Vignar asks if he thinks this is personal, then he says the Empire has no place in Skyrim anymore, and neither does Balgruuf in Whiterun. Balgruuf makes a strong point that this is convenient now, but one day will come where Ulfric's rebellion will be spread thin, and then what do we have? Then the Jarl says we need the Empire as much as it needs us. Nords are the Empire. Their blood built it, sustains it, and he of all people should know that. Vignar fires back that if this was his empire, we'd be able to worship whoever we pleased, and asks if Balgruuf wants to see an empire without Talos and without its soul. We should be fighting those witch elves, not bending the knee to them. The empire is nothing more than a puppet of the Thalmor. Skyrim needs a high king who will fight for her, and Whiterun needs a jarl who will do the same. Again, you're fighting an empire that was beaten by a much stronger empire. Splintering off isn't going to help deal with that fact. It's only going to make it worse. But we'll move on. Balgruuf asked Vignar if it was worth it, asking how many corpses lining the streets wear faces of men who once called him friend. Galmar has to step in to stop this bickering, and then says they have a city that needs a government. Balgruuf says this isn't over before talking directly to us, saying he thought better of us, and will come to regret this day. Then Ralof chimes in to say he thinks he killed more than us as he was counting. Then the quest ends. We'll start Liberation of Skyrim, the overarching quest that'll govern us taking over Skyrim for the Stormcloaks. We'll return to Windhelm to let Ulfric know the fate of Whiterun and Balgruuf. He says driving the Empire out of Whiterun is very good, as the center is a powerful position in Skyrim. Our new title will be Ice Veins now, as the thick blood of our land has seeped into our heart. We'll be gifted an Imperial officer's sword, and be told he suspects will be of greater use with greater freedom, so we're free to engage the Imperials as we see fit, which is a massive strategic black hole of logic to have your forces do whatever they want. Anyway, he'll point us toward the Stormcloak camp in Falkreath, and that Galmar will have tasks for us as we cause mayhem for the Imperials. This follows a similar route as the Imperial questline, where we'll go do missions and take forts around Skyrim until we attack the enemy's capital city. Let's get going. The Stormcloak camp for Falkreath is located near Helgen, so it'll be an easy trip there. Once we arrive, Galmar will explain that we're going to Fort Neugrad and are going to rescue Stormcloaks locked up there. Then we'll do the same idea as we did with Fort Kastav in the Imperial questline, where we'll sneak in to free prisoners and attack from within. We'll find Ralof amongst our crew, who will ask how we've been and then says these are dark days, but at least we're doing our part to make things better. Whatever you say, bud. Anyway, he'll have command like Hadvar did, and needs this to go well, and he also has PTSD like Hadvar as well. There's lots of copy and pasting of content here for the Civil War content, which is disappointing, but we'll talk about that more later. Anyway, we'll make our way inside Fort Neugrad through an underwater tunnel that leads inside. We'll free the prisoners and head outside to signal Ralof, and we'll take the fort. Ralof tells us to head back as he cleans up, and with that, we've liberated Falkreath by taking a fort nobody has any reason to walk past. Great. Great. We'll return to Ulfric to bring him the good news, and he's proud we liberated Falkreath. In many ways, it's the heart and soul of Skyrim, not to mention a rather strategic position. Then he says some brothers have taken to calling us Bonebreaker, evidence of our ferocity and determination, so we'll be called that now. We just got our last nickname, so it's going to be tough to remember all these at this rate. He says the war demands much from us, but he'd like to offer a home in Windhelm to us, and we can speak to his steward to make the arrangements. Again, that's for another video. Then he'll tell us to head to the camp in the Reach, and we'll head out for the next quest. We'll make it to the Reach camp after a long run, and then Galmar gives us orders to go to Markarth. Rumor has it that the Jarl's steward, Raric, is a faithful Talos worshipper, if not a true son of Skyrim. Then he says he supports the Empire after all, but if confronted with proof of his belief, we might be able to persuade him to aid our cause indirectly. It's the Imperial version of the quest, but with a different context. As soon as we enter Markarth, we'll witness someone be murdered, as we couldn't save her. We'll get more context for this later on, but for now, let's get to the blackmail of rare steak. We'll have a harder time breaking into this area, as we have to lockpick a door and make it past several guards. It's not impossible, but we get caught after lockpicking the door. Once we find the evidence, we'll talk to him and he'll tell us to follow. We'll do that and he'll know we're going to extort him. He'll learn we're a Stormcloak spy and say that he can't deny that Ulfric is right about a few things, but he's seen what he is capable of, so he's no friend to him or Markarth. Rarestake's only loyalties are to Markarth and his nephew the Jarl. We'll suggest an agreement, and he'll mention a large shipment of silver and weapons. It's being taken to Solitude in a slow caravan, and then we'll leave without screwing over the old man. We'll let Galmar know of the caravan, and then we'll head out to take the silver and weapons for the cause. We'll see Ralof again. He says the Reach is beautiful but dangerous, as one false step can have you fall to your death, unless the Forsworn get you first. Like with Hadvar, he'll have a plan to capture the loot and kill the guards, but we'll run in slicing alone and tell him to hold back. They'll come when they hear fighting, but we'll cut down the guards fast enough where they hardly have time to even see it. Ralof will stay to guard the shipment, and we'll return to camp and move to the next quest. Galmar will point us toward Fort Sungard, and we'll fight off the Reds until the only red around is their blood. Then we'll return to Ulfric, who says that with the Empire driven from the Reach, we can stop them from raping the silver mines. That belongs to Skyrim. The silver, not the raping of it. Then he gives us another nickname in a week. Now we're called Snowhammer, even though we use a sword. Wonder if Ulfric is blind or something. Then he'll give us a token of appreciation in a hide shield. Just a regular old hide shield. Yeah. Thanks for the discount chocolate bar, sir. Then he'll point us toward Hjalmarch, and we'll head over to the swamp. Galmar will say that once we've reclaimed our homeland, we'll take the fight to the Thalmor, as they are the true enemy. If they are the true enemy, why are you wasting resources fighting each other? Sorry, some of his psychopathy is rubbing off on me. I apologize. Anyway, he'll point us toward delivering false orders to the Imperial Legate in Morthal. Like the Imperial version, we need a report to create the forgeries. The inns at Dragonbridge and Hraggstad are frequent stops for the Empire's runners. We'll head over to Hraggstad and threaten the innkeeper, and we'll head out to track the poor messenger down we need to murder. We'll find him at Dragonbridge, ironically going to the only other place he would be, and we kill him in the inn like Galmar probably wanted, with rampant shouting and blood covering it all. We'll get a bounty, and we'll kill more Imperial soldiers before we escape the area. And a random Nord. Don't know why he attacked us, but things are going crazy with the war. We'll return to Galmar, who will forge the documents, redirecting reinforcements, and fabricating enemy movements. We'll deliver it and use the same tactic we used before, and we'll return to Galmar for the next quest. When we return to Galmar, he'll direct us to Fort Snowhawk, where we'll wipe out many an Imperial. We'll clear out the fort, probably earning the nickname Bloodspinner, Authority Crusher, and Steve the Subversive Stormcloak by the time we make it back to Ulfric. Anyway, he'll say Tullius must be getting nervous with us in his backyard. Then he'll say we've become a true hero of Skyrim. Now we'll be known as Stormblade, because the love of the land and her people flows from our heart, even as death is brought to her enemies from our hands. Then he'll give us leather armor. Man, the Imperial rewards were way better than this. On the plus side, we got the Stormcloak officer getup, which looks like Galmar, which is pretty Nordy and cool. We'll head to the camp in Hafingar and take one more fort. We'll reach the camp and talk to Galmar. We're going to Fort Hraggstad, and we'll head up the mountains to reach it. This is the fort we initially cleared for the Imperial side, so it's fun to note it's the last fort we capture, assuming the Season Unending quest didn't redistribute Empire and Stormcloak territories. In any case, we'll take the fort and head back to Galmar. When we return, Galmar says we're taking Solitude, so let's wrap up this rebellion. We'll meet Ulfric outside the gates of Solitude, and Ulfric gives his expected speech. We come to this moment carried by the sacrifices and courage of our fellows, those who have fallen, and those still bearing the shields to our right. On this day, our enemy will know the fullness of our determination, the true depth of our anger, and the exalted righteousness of our cause. Then we'll head inside the capital. Like the finale at Windhelm, we'll have to reach Castle Dour to take out the enemy leader, General Tullius. We'll fight through much of Solitude until we enter Castle Dour. Rikke will tell Ulfric to stop, as without the Empire, Skyrim will assuredly fall to the Aldmeri Dominion. Galmar says she was there with them when they saw the treaty signed. That day was the day the Empire died. Rikke calls him a fool before he tells her to step aside, as they've come for the general. Rikke says he has given up, but she hasn't. Ulfric tells her to go, as she is free to leave, but she counters that she is also free to stay and fight for what she believes in. Ulfric coldly says she's free to die for it as well. Then Rika asks if this is what they wanted. Shield brothers and sisters killing each other. Families torn apart. Then she asks if this is the Skyrim they want. Galmar tells her to stand aside again, but she refuses, and we fight. Rika is killed, sadly, and we'll deal with Tullius. Ulfric asks if he has any last words. Tullius does, saying this is exactly what the Thalmor wanted. They stirred up trouble, and now the Empire has to divert needed resources and throw away good soldiers into quelling this rebellion. Ulfric taunts him, brashly saying it's a little more than a rebellion, before Tullius says that they aren't the bad guys. Ulfric says maybe not, but they're certainly not the good guys. Tullius says that perhaps they're right, but what does that make us? Galmar says it makes us right. Tullius asks what if he surrenders, and Ulfric said the Empire he remembered never surrendered, which is pretty hypocritical given how he gave up and surrendered when the roles were reversed at the beginning of the game. Anyway, Galmar is ready to end this, but Ulfric mentions the sense of the dramatic moment. Galmar is annoyed by this, saying if we want a good ending to a story, perhaps the Dragonborn should kill him. When asked, we'll say we had our fair share of killing today. Then Ulfric will teabag Tullius before killing him. Then we'll prepare to head out to the courtyard for a speech, as we learned Galmar sent men to round up Elisif. Ulfric will gift us his sword and ask us to stand by his side as the truest of Stormcloaks. We decline to be involved in the speech, as many fought and died, and we're no different than they are. Ulfric disagrees, but will honor our request. The gods know our victories, and they will glory in our deeds. Galmar hypes Ulfric as High King before he gives his speech. He says that we are all heroes, the ones who fought a dying empire who sunk its claws into our land, trying to drag us down with it. It was all of us that fought the Thalmor, and their puppets who would have us deny our gods and heritage. It was all of us who fought our kin, who didn't understand the cause, and who weren't willing to pay the price of our freedom. But more than that, it was all of us who fought for Skyrim, and our right to fight our own battles, to return to our glory and traditions, and to determine our own future. Then Ulfric says that it is because of these reasons that he cannot accept the mantle of High King. Not until the moot declares that title should adorn his shoulders will he accept it. Funny how he says this in humility, when he's effectively replaced all opposition on the board. He's rigged the game so he could win while feigning humility. Think about that for a minute. Then a Stormcloak asks about Elisif. Ulfric asks if she will put aside her personal hatred for Ulfric and her misplaced love for the Emperor and his coin, so that the suffering of our people will end. Will she acknowledge that it is we Nords who will determine Skyrim's future? Will she swear fealty to Ulfric, so all may know that we are at peace, and a new day has dawned? Elisif says I do, which is fair given the situation. Then Ulfric says she will continue to rule Solitude, and the Stormcloaks will garrison the city to ward off Imperial attempts to reclaim it. And in due time, the Moot will meet to settle the claim of High King once and for all. He calls to everyone that he will need aid to rebuild Skyrim, and that a great darkness is growing, and soon we will be called to fight it on these shores or abroad. The Aldmeri Dominion may have defeated the Empire, but not Skyrim. Afterward, Ulfric will ask how he did, and Galmar says it wasn't bad, adding that it was a nice touch to add the High King part, even if it's a foregone conclusion. Then Galmar mentions Imperial camps in the hills that will attack when they can, but Ulfric says they will all eventually return to their families. What he really fears is that the Thalmor will see this victory and turn greater attention to our shores. We must be prepared to face them. Then he says he couldn't have done it without us, and will talk to Ulfric afterward, asking if we call him High King. He says not yet, but he'll start acting like it. There's much to do, as the new Jarls need help building armies and enforcing their right to rule. The Empire may try to reclaim Skyrim, and he needs everyone ready for that, though the biggest threat is still the Thalmor. We'll ask of peace after the Imperial defeat, and Ulfric says there will be peace for a time, during which we must rebuild Skyrim into a strong, self-reliant center of mankind. We're doing all this as getting rid of the Empire was only half the problem. The Elves will soon seek to rule the world, so we must ready ourselves. We'll ask if there is anything further we can help with, and Ulfric says the Legion is crippled and we're free to roam. We can always run into the Legion's camps, so we'll deal with them if it happens. After the Civil War has ended for either side, the surviving Jarls and Stewards of the losing party will be held in the capital of the winning side. Imperial losers go to Windhelm, Stormcloak losers go to Solitude. But with all this out of the way, we've wrapped up the Civil War arc of Skyrim. Let me know in the comments which side you support and why. I'm very biased toward the Empire myself, for multiple reasons, but I'm always curious of other perspectives. With the Civil War completed, we'll be moving on to the next major questline. We'll be tackling different things in different videos, so stay tuned for more. There will be a link to my game commentary playlist in the description, so keep an eye on that if you want to watch my other stuff, or if you want to find where all the Skyrim videos will be. Hopefully it won't take me too long to make each video, and I should be able to tackle each one quickly after the last one. For now, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and God bless.